Jake Harrison stood at the big window of his ship and looked out into the darkness. His ship was called the UES Frontier, and it was the best exploration ship that Earth had ever built. Jake was the commander, and he had been flying through space for 15 years. He had seen many strange things, but nothing like what he was looking at now. The edge of the galaxy stretched out before them like a wall of black nothing. Every star map showed the same thing. Beyond this point, there was supposed to be empty space that went on forever. No planets, no stars, no life. Just cold darkness that would kill anyone who tried to cross it. Jake was not like other ship commanders. Most captains would turn around and go back to safe space, but Jake had always been curious about things that other people said were impossible. That was why Earth had chosen him for this mission. The government wanted someone who would not give up when things got scary. The bridge of his ship was busy with people working. There were humans from Earth and also aliens from other planets who had joined the crew. The Galactic Council had many different species, and most of them thought humans were too young and reckless to be trusted with important missions. But Jake had proven them wrong many times. Dr. Lisa Carter walked over to where Jake was standing. She was holding a data pad and her face looked worried. Lisa was the smartest person Jake had ever met. She understood physics and space science better than most alien professors who had been studying for hundreds of years. "Commander," she said quietly, "I need to show you something strange." Jake took the data pad and looked at the numbers on the screen. He was not a scientist, but he had learned enough over the years to understand basic readings. What he saw made no sense at all. "These energy readings," Jake said, "they look like something big is out there, but our cameras show nothing." Lisa nodded and pointed toward the black space ahead of them. "That is exactly the problem. Our instruments say there are objects larger than planets moving around out there, but we cannot see them with any of our cameras or scanners." At the navigation station, Alex Rodriguez turned around with a confused look on his face. Alex had been flying ships since he was 16 years old and had never seen anything like this. He was good at finding his way through space even when the star charts were wrong. "Sir," Alex said, "the gravitational readings are crazy. It is like there are huge things out there pulling on space itself, but there is nothing there that we can see." Jake walked over to Alex's station and looked at the navigation computer. The screen showed lines and numbers that represented the pull of gravity from different objects. According to the computer, there should be massive structures right in front of them. But when Jake looked out the window, he saw only darkness. The alien crew members were starting to look nervous. The HFY were insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes. Their culture taught them that the edge of the galaxy was a sacred place that should never be disturbed. The Delphins looked like dolphins but could breathe air and had hands. They came from a water world, and their religion said that crossing the edge would anger the gods. Even the ship's computer seemed to be having trouble. The artificial intelligence that helped run the ship kept giving warnings about entering dangerous space. But the warnings made no sense because they were not detecting any obvious threats. Jake had made many difficult decisions in his career, but this one felt different. Every instinct told him to be careful. Every rulebook said to turn around and report back to Earth Command. But something deep inside him said that this was important. This was why humans had come to the stars. Ben Murphy, the chief engineer, came up from the engine room with grease on his uniform. Ben was a big man with strong hands who could fix anything that broke on the ship. He had worked on starships for 20 years and knew every sound they made. "Captain," Ben said, "the engines are running fine, but something weird is happening. The power systems keep trying to adjust themselves like they are getting ready for something big." Jake nodded and thought about what this meant. Ships were designed to automatically prepare for different situations. If the engines were getting ready for something, it meant the ship's computers thought they were about to encounter conditions they had never seen before. Dr. Sarah. Wells came onto the bridge carrying a tablet computer. Sarah studied alien life and had discovered 3 new species during her career. She was young but very smart, and other scientists respected her work. "Commander," Sarah said, "I have been reading the old records from other species who tried to cross the edge. The Zephyrians lost 12 ships here 50 years ago. The Korath Empire sent their best military fleet and none of them came back. Even the ethereals who can turn into pure energy say this place is too dangerous." Jake looked around at his crew. He could see that some of them were scared. The aliens especially looked like they wanted to leave immediately, but the humans looked curious and excited. That was the difference between humans and most other species. Where others saw danger, humans saw mystery that needed to be solved. Kate Foster was monitoring the ship's defensive systems from her station. Kate was a tactical officer who had fought in 3 different wars. She knew how to protect the ship from almost any kind of attack, but her sensors were not showing any weapons or hostile ships. "Sir," Kate said, "I am not detecting any immediate threats, but something is definitely out there. The computer keeps trying to raise shields even though nothing is shooting at us." Jake made his decision. He had not become a starship commander by playing it safe. Earth had sent him out here to explore and learn new things. If he turned around now, they would never know what was waiting in the darkness. "All hands," Jake announced over the ship's communication system, "prepare for edge transition. We are going into unknown space." The alien crew members made worried sounds, but they followed orders. The humans smiled and got ready for adventure. This was what they had signed up for when they joined the crew. Lisa checked her instruments one more time. "Commander, once we cross that line, we will be in completely uncharted territory. No one knows what is out there." Jake nodded and sat down in the captain's chair. "That is exactly why we need to find out. Take us across the edge, Alex." The ship moved forward toward the wall of darkness that marked the end of everything they knew. What they would find waiting in the void would change not just their lives but the future of every species in the galaxy. The UES frontier crossed into the unknown and disappeared from all tracking systems as if it had never existed at all. The UES frontier moved through the darkness like a ghost ship sailing on an ocean of nothing. Jake Harrison felt his stomach drop as they crossed the invisible line that marked the edge of the galaxy. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The stars behind them still shone and the ship's engines hummed quietly. But then something changed. Dr. Lisa Carter was the first to notice it. Her instruments started showing readings that should not exist. Energy patterns that broke every rule of physics she had ever learned. Space itself seemed to be twisted into shapes that made no sense. "Commander," Lisa said with excitement in her voice, "you need to see this right now." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the screen. What he saw made him step backward in surprise. The empty void around them was full of structures. Massive objects that were bigger than planets floated in the darkness just outside their ship. But when he looked out the window, he could see nothing at all. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head and pointed at different readings on her computer. "These objects are there, but they are not reflecting any light. It is like they are made of something that absorbs everything we try to use to detect them. But they have mass, and they are definitely artificial." Alex Rodriguez called out from his navigation station with worry in his voice. "Captain, the star charts are useless out here. My computer cannot figure out where we are. It is like space works differently in this place." Ben Murphy came running onto the bridge from the engine room. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. Ben was not easily scared, but something had frightened him badly. "Sir," Ben said, "the engines just did something impossible. For about 10 seconds they were producing more power than they were consuming. That cannot happen according to any engineering manual ever written." Jake felt a chill run down his back. Ships did not create energy from nothing. If the engines were behaving strangely, it meant they were in a place where the normal rules did not apply. Dr. Sarah Wells was studying readings from the ship's biological scanners. These instruments were designed to detect life forms even from great distances. What they were showing her made her question everything she thought she knew about life in the universe. "Commander," Sarah said quietly, "there are life signs out there, massive life signs, but they are not like anything in our databases. The readings suggest consciousness on a scale I have never seen before." The alien crew members were becoming more and more frightened. The Vexhi were making clicking sounds that meant extreme distress in their language. The Delphins were swimming in tight circles in their water tank, which they only did when they sensed great danger. Kate Foster was monitoring the ship's defensive systems when something incredible happened. Her screen suddenly filled with new information that seemed to appear from nowhere. Detailed scans of objects around them that her instruments had not been able to detect moments before. "Sir," Kate said with amazement, "something just gave us a complete scan of everything in this area. But the data did not come through any of our communication systems. It just appeared directly in our computers." Jake looked at the new information on Kate's screen. What he saw took his breath away. They were surrounded by structures that were so large they made entire star systems look small. cities that floated in space without any visible means of support, constructions that seemed to be built from materials that did not exist in any periodic table. "My God," whispered Ben as he looked at the scans. "These things are not just big. They are impossibly big. How could anyone build something the size of a solar system?" The ship's communication system suddenly activated by itself. A voice spoke through the speakers, but it was not coming from any radio transmission. The voice seemed to speak directly into their minds, while also coming through the ship's audio system. "Welcome, travelers from the spiral arms," the voice said. It sounded ancient and wise, but also somehow sad. "We have been watching your approach with great interest. You are the first to come here by choice rather than accident." Jake stood up, straight, and tried to look confident even though his heart was beating fast. "This is Commander Jake Harrison of the Earthship UES Frontier. Who are you and where are you?" The voice seemed to smile even though they could not see who was speaking. "We are what your people might call the Void Architects. We have lived in this space between galaxies for longer than your star has existed. We build and create and watch the younger species as they grow and learn." Lisa was recording everything on her instruments. The voice was not creating sound waves or radio signals. Instead, it seemed to be speaking by changing the vibrations of matter itself. This kind of technology was far beyond anything humans or any other galactic species possessed. "Why can we not see you?" Jake asked. "Because you are still thinking in the old ways," the voice replied. "You expect to see us with light and detect us with electromagnetic radiation. But we exist in ways that your current science cannot measure. However, your species shows promise. You perceive things differently than others who have come before." Sarah realized something important. "Commander, I think they are saying that humans can sense them when other species cannot. That is why we detected the gravitational anomalies and energy readings that everyone else missed." The voice spoke again, and this time it sounded pleased. "The young scientist understands. Your species has a gift that others lack. You see beyond the boundaries that limit most forms of consciousness. This is why we chose to reveal ourselves to you." Alex suddenly called out from his station. "Sir, my instruments are showing something incredible. There are pathways through space that connect this area to other galaxies, like roads between distant places that I never knew existed." The Void Architect's voice became more serious. "Indeed, young navigator, the universe is far larger and more connected than your galaxy believes. What you call the void between galaxies is actually full of civilization and life. But most species never develop the ability to perceive it." Jake felt his mind expanding as he tried to understand what they were being told. "Are you saying that there are entire civilizations living in the space between galaxies?" "Not just civilizations," the voice replied. "Entire forms of existence that transcend what you consider possible. We have been waiting a very long time for a species that could join us in this greater reality." Ben looked at his engineering readings and saw something that made him dizzy. "Captain, the ship is somehow drawing power from sources that do not exist. We should be running out of fuel, but instead our energy reserves are increasing." The voice of the Void Architect spoke one final time before falling silent. "Rest now, children of Earth. Tomorrow we will begin to show you wonders that will change your understanding of everything. Your journey into the greater universe starts here." The UES Frontier floated in the impossible darkness, surrounded by mysteries that would transform humanity forever. Jake Harrison opened his eyes and found himself standing on the bridge of his ship, but everything was wrong. The walls seemed to breathe like living things, and the stars outside the window were moving backward through time. His crew was there, but they looked strange, like they were made of light instead of solid matter. "Do not be afraid," said the voice of the Void Architects. It no longer came through the ship's speakers, but seemed to speak from the air itself. "We are showing you reality as it truly exists. What you normally see is only a small part of what is actually there." Dr. Lisa Carter walked toward Jake, but her feet did not touch the floor. She was floating and glowing with soft blue light. When she spoke, her voice echoed from multiple directions at once. "Commander," she said, "I can see equations floating in the air, mathematical formulas that explain how space and time work, but they are nothing like what we learned in school." Jake tried to move toward Lisa, but found that thinking about movement was the same as actually moving. He simply appeared next to her without walking. This place operated by completely different rules than the normal universe. Welcome to the test, the Void Architect said. For millions of years, we have waited for a species that could perceive reality beyond the narrow band that most consciousness accepts as real. You humans show the potential we have been seeking. The bridge began to change around them. The metal walls became transparent and Jake could see through them into space. But this was not the empty void they had entered. This space was full of colors and patterns that hurt to look at directly. Streams of energy flowed between invisible objects like rivers of pure thought. Alex Rodriguez appeared beside them, but he looked confused and frightened. Sir, I can see the paths between galaxies now. There are highways through space that connect every star system in the universe. How did we never know about this? Ben Murphy materialized near the engineering station, but the station itself was now a living tree made of crystal. The roots extended through dimensions that Jake could sense but not fully understand. Ben reached out to touch the crystal and knowledge flowed into his mind. Captain, Ben said with wonder in his voice, I understand now how our engines have been getting extra power. They are tapping into the energy that flows between dimensions. This place is full of power sources that normal science cannot detect. The Void Architects began to show them images that appeared directly in their minds. Jake saw the history of the galaxy as it really was. Civilizations that had risen and fallen not just on planets but in the spaces between atoms, beings that existed as pure mathematics. Wars fought across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your species fascinates us, the Void Architects explained. Most races develop intelligence that fits perfectly into their environment. They become very good at solving problems within the rules they understand. But humans are different. Dr. Sarah Wells found herself standing in what looked like a library that extended infinitely in all directions. The books on the shelves contained not words but living memories from beings across the universe. She opened one and experienced the entire lifetime of a creature made of crystallized time. Commander, Sarah called out across impossible distance, they are showing me the real history of life in the universe. There are forms of consciousness we never imagined, beings that think in ways we cannot even describe. Jake felt his own mind expanding as the Void Architects shared more knowledge with him. He could suddenly perceive 17 different dimensions at once. In some dimensions, the galaxy was young and full of new life. In others, it was ancient and dying. In still others, it existed as pure mathematical concepts. This is the test, the Void Architect said. Can your minds handle the truth of what reality actually contains? Most species fail at this point. They cannot accept that everything they believed about the universe was limited and incomplete. Kate Foster appeared floating in a space filled with weapons that existed as geometric shapes. Each shape represented a different way of manipulating the fundamental forces of creation. She reached out to touch one and immediately understood how to reshape matter using only focused thought. Sir, Kate said, these beings do not fight wars the way we understand fighting. They battle using concepts and ideas as weapons. They can change the basic rules that govern how physics works. The test became more intense. Jake and his crew were shown civilizations that existed entirely in the mathematical relationships between prime numbers. They met beings that lived inside the quantum fluctuations of empty space. They witnessed the birth and death of universes that lasted only microseconds, but contained billions of years of subjective time. Your species has always been different, the Void Architects continued. Where others see limits, humans see challenges to overcome. Where others accept that something is impossible, humans ask why and look for ways around the problem. Alex found himself navigating through a maze made of folded space-time. Each turn revealed new star systems that existed in pocket dimensions. Captain, he said, the whole universe is like this. Everything we thought was solid and permanent is actually flexible and changeable. Ben was working with tools that reshaped reality at the atomic level. Sir, I can see how to build engines that run on the energy of possibility itself. We could travel anywhere in the universe instantly just by thinking about being there. The Void Architects showed them the real reason for the test. The galaxy that humanity called home was in danger, not from any external threat, but from the accumulated weight of billions of minds all believing in the same limited version of reality. This collective certainty was making the universe rigid and inflexible. We need your help, the Void Architects admitted. We have transcended physical reality, but in doing so, we lost the ability to interact with it effectively. We need beings who are still connected to the material universe but capable of perceiving beyond its apparent limitations. Lisa understood first. They want us to teach other species that reality is not fixed. that the universe is much larger and more flexible than anyone believes. Jake felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. What happens if we refuse or if we fail? The Void Architects showed them one final image. A universe where all possibility had been exhausted, where every star burned with cold fire and every planet was locked into perfect, sterile order. A cosmos where nothing new could ever happen, because everyone believed that everything had already been decided. That is the future if consciousness does not expand beyond its current limitations, they said. But with your help, we can teach the galaxy to see reality as it truly is. Infinite, flexible, and full of wonders that await discovery. Jake looked at his crew floating in impossible space and made the decision that would change the fate of every living being in the universe. What do we need to do? The Void Architects revealed themselves completely to Jake Harrison and his crew. What the humans saw changed everything they thought they knew about life and death and the nature of existence itself. The beings were not aliens in any sense that made logical sense. They had once been physical creatures like humans, but that was so long ago that their home star had been born, lived its entire life, and died while they watched. They had learned to step outside the normal flow of time and space, becoming something that existed in the gaps between moments. Jake found his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his physical body. He could suddenly perceive the entire galaxy as a single living organism. Every star was like a cell, and every planet was like an atom in something much larger than he had ever imagined. We were the first, the Void Architects explained, and their words came not as sound but as direct understanding. Our species developed intelligence when this galaxy was young and wild. We learned to manipulate matter and energy, to travel between stars, to reshape worlds to suit our needs. Dr. Lisa Carter felt knowledge flowing into her mind like water filling an empty container. She could see the mathematical equations that governed reality itself. But more than that, she could see how those equations were not fixed laws but more like suggestions that could be changed by conscious will. But we made a mistake, the Void Architects continued. We believed that understanding the universe meant controlling it completely. We spent millions of years cataloging every law of physics, every chemical reaction, every possible outcome of every possible situation. Alex Rodriguez experienced memories that were not his own. He lived through the rise and fall of civilizations that had existed before Earth's sun was even born. He saw species that had evolved in the hearts of stars and others that lived in the quantum foam between particles of matter. The truth was more terrible than any of them had imagined. The galaxy was dying not because it was running out of energy or because the stars were burning out. It was dying because too many minds had decided that reality worked in only one way. The combined belief of billions of sentient beings was making the universe rigid and predictable. Think of it this way, the Void Architect said, trying to explain in terms humans could understand. Reality is like soft clay that can be shaped by consciousness. But when too many minds believe the clay is hard stone, it actually becomes hard stone. The flexibility disappears. Ben Murphy found himself understanding technology that was millions of years ahead of anything humans had ever built. Engines that ran on the power of imagination. Ships that traveled by convincing space that they were already at their destination. Weapons that worked by making enemies forget they existed. Dr. Sarah Wells experienced life from the perspective of beings that thought in colors instead of words. Creatures that existed as living songs, and intelligences that had evolved from the background radiation left over from the creation of the universe. Each form of consciousness perceived reality differently, and each perception was equally valid. We tried to fix the problem ourselves, the Void Architects admitted. We attempted to teach other species to think more flexibly, to see beyond the limitations they had accepted. But we had been outside normal reality for so long that we could no longer communicate effectively with physical beings. Kate Foster learned to perceive weapons and conflicts that existed on levels she had never suspected. Wars fought by changing the fundamental constants that governed how physics worked. Battles where victory meant convincing your enemy that they had never existed in the first place. The crew of the UES Frontier began to understand their true purpose. Humans were not just another intelligent species. They were something unique in the galaxy's history. While other races had evolved to fit perfectly into their environments, humans had evolved to change their environments to fit them. This is why we waited for you, the Void Architects said. Every other species we have encountered thinks inside boundaries. They accept limitations as permanent features of reality. But humans always ask why those limitations exist and look for ways around them. Jake felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on him like a heavy cloak. The Void Architects were asking humanity to save not just the galaxy, but the entire universe from becoming locked into a single, rigid pattern of existence. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" Jake said. Though he already suspected, he knew the answer. The Void Architects showed them images of the future. In some possible timelines, the galaxy continued to become more rigid, until every star burned with cold mathematical precision, and every planet followed perfectly predictable orbits. In these futures, nothing new could ever happen because every possibility had been calculated and locked into place. But in other timelines, consciousness learned to expand beyond its current limits. Species discovered that reality was not a fixed system, but an infinite canvas waiting to be painted with new possibilities. The universe became a place where miracles were commonplace and imagination could reshape the fundamental forces of creation. "You must return to your galaxy," the Void Architects said. "You must teach other species what you have learned here. Show them that the boundaries they accept are not real. Demonstrate that consciousness can transcend any limitation if it refuses to accept that the limitation is permanent." Lisa realized the enormous challenge they faced. How can we convince entire civilizations to abandon everything they believe about how reality works? Most species will think we have gone insane. The Void Architects had an answer for this concern. They began to change the UES frontier itself, upgrading it with technology that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ship became a bridge between normal reality and the expanded consciousness they had experienced. "You will have proof," they said. "Your ship now operates using principles that your galaxy's science says are impossible. When you demonstrate capabilities that break every known law of physics, other species will have to consider that their understanding of reality might be incomplete." Alex discovered that he could now navigate through dimensions that did not appear on any star chart. Ben learned to build engines that drew power from the dreams of sleeping civilizations. Sarah found that she could communicate with forms of life that existed as pure information. Kate received weapons that could defend against attacks from beings that existed outside normal space and time. But more importantly, she learned that the most powerful weapon was the ability to help other minds expand beyond their perceived limitations. The transformation was complete. The crew of the UES Frontier had become something new. They were still human, but they were also something more. They had retained their connection to physical reality, while gaining the ability to perceive and interact with forces that transcended normal existence. "It is time," the Void Architects said. "Return to your galaxy and begin the greatest mission any species has ever undertaken. Teach consciousness itself to grow beyond the boundaries it has accepted. Save reality from becoming trapped in a cage built from the limitations of rigid thinking." Jake looked at his transformed crew and felt both excitement and terror at what lay ahead. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before. They were going to try to change the way an entire galaxy thought about the nature of existence itself. The journey back to the galaxy took place across 7 different dimensions at the same time. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Frontier and watched as reality bent around them like water flowing around a stone. His ship was no longer bound by the normal rules of physics and could travel through space in ways that should have been impossible. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored instruments that now showed readings from multiple universes simultaneously. The ship existed in several different phases of reality at once, making it capable of things that would seem like magic to anyone who saw it. Their hull was made of matter that could become solid or transparent, depending on what they needed it to do. The return to normal galactic space happened gradually. First, they could see the outer rim stars appearing like distant candles in the darkness. Then the familiar patterns of star clusters became visible. Finally, they emerged into the space they had left behind, but they were no longer the same people who had departed. Alex Rodriguez found that navigating was completely different now. He could see the currents of energy that flowed between star systems like invisible rivers. He could plot courses through dimensions that most ships could not even detect. The journey that should have taken months was completed in just a few days. When they reached the coordinates where the Galactic Council station orbited the star Kepler Prime, Jake knew that everything was about to change. The station was a massive structure that housed representatives from over 1,000 different worlds. It was the center of galactic government and the place where all major decisions were made. Ben Murphy checked the ship's new systems one final time. Their engines now drew power from the quantum fluctuations of empty space. Their shields could deflect attacks from weapons that existed in parallel dimensions. The ship itself had become proof that reality was far more flexible than anyone believed. The communication from Kepler Station came exactly as Jake had expected. UES Frontier, this is Station Control. You have been missing for 3 months. Please respond immediately with your status and location. Jake opened a channel back to the station. This is Commander Jake Harrison. We are requesting immediate permission to address the full Galactic Council. We have discovered something that every species in the galaxy needs to know. Dr. Sarah Wells prepared the biological samples they had brought back. These were not normal specimens, but rather examples of life forms that existed in the spaces between dimensions. Creatures that proved consciousness could take forms that had never been imagined by galactic science. The response from the station showed the fear and suspicion that Jake had anticipated. U.S. Frontier, you will dock at Bay 7 and submit to immediate inspection. All crew members will report for medical and psychological evaluation before any council meetings are authorized. Kate Foster smiled as she monitored the station's defensive systems. She could see that their weapons were powering up and their shields were being raised. The aliens were preparing to treat the human ship as a potential threat. They had no idea how much things had changed. Take us to docking Bay 7, Jake ordered Alex. But let them see what we have become. As the UES Frontier approached the massive space station,
Jake gave Lisa the signal she had been waiting for.
She reached out with her enhanced consciousness and touched the star that the station orbited. Using knowledge gained from the Void Architects, she caused the star to split into 2 separate stars, each one stable and burning brightly. The effect on the station was immediate and dramatic. Every alien on board watched in terror and amazement as their sun became 2 suns. The energy readings from both stars were perfect, and there was no threat to the station or any of the surrounding planets. But the demonstration proved that humans could now do things that were supposed to be impossible. Emergency. Communications flooded the radio channels as alien scientists tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The Zephyrians believed their crystal technology was the most advanced in the galaxy, but they had no explanation for how matter could be reorganized on such a massive scale. The Korath military commanders were terrified because their weapons could not defend against beings who could manipulate stars themselves. UES Frontier, came a new voice over the communication system. This was Admiral Vextalk of the Galactic Defense Force. By what authority do you demonstrate weapons of mass destruction in a peaceful system? Jake responded, calmly even though he knew his words would shock every alien who heard them. Admiral, we did not use any weapons. Dr. Carter simply reached out with her mind and convinced the star that it wanted to become 2 stars instead of 1. Reality is much more flexible than your science believes. The docking procedure was tense and carefully monitored. Every sensor on the station was focused on the human ship as it settled into the docking bay. When Jake and his crew walked off their ship, the aliens who met them could sense immediately that something fundamental had changed about these humans. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Chamber to hear what the humans had discovered. Jake stood before them with his crew and began to explain what they had learned in the void between galaxies. For millions of years, Jake said, every species in this galaxy has believed that reality operates according to fixed and unchangeable laws. We have all accepted that certain things are impossible and that the universe works in only one way. But this belief is wrong, and it is killing our galaxy. The alien delegates reacted with everything from confusion to anger to outright disbelief. The ethereal ambassador, a being of pure energy who was thousands of years old, spoke for many when she said, "Young human, you speak of impossibilities as if they were simple facts. How can consciousness affect physical reality in the ways you describe?" Lisa stepped forward and demonstrated by reaching out to touch the quantum structure of the chamber itself. She caused the walls to become transparent so that everyone could see the stars outside. Then she made them solid again. Finally, she caused patterns of light to dance through the air, while she explained the mathematics that made it possible. Reality responds to consciousness, Lisa said. The more minds that believe something is impossible, the more impossible it becomes. But if consciousness expands beyond its accepted limitations, anything can happen. Dr. Sarah Wells introduced the Council to life forms that existed as living mathematics and creatures that had evolved in the spaces between atoms. Ben Murphy demonstrated technology that drew power from the dreams of sleeping planets. Kate Foster showed them weapons that could defend against attacks from beings who existed outside normal time and space. But the real change began with the younger members of the various alien species. Those who had not yet become locked into rigid thinking patterns found that they could learn to perceive reality as humans did. They discovered that the universe was not a collection of fixed rules but an infinite canvas of possibilities waiting to be explored. Alex Rodriguez established the first navigation, charts for travel between dimensions. Sarah Wells opened the first school for expanded consciousness on the neutral world of Kepler Station. Lisa Carter began working with alien scientists to develop new technologies that operated on principles their old science had said were impossible. The galaxy that had once seemed so vast and well understood was revealed to be just the first room in an infinite mansion of realities. Beyond the visible stars lay dimensions upon dimensions populated by forms of life and consciousness that challenged every definition of what it meant to exist. Some species, like the militant Korath, saw the new abilities as threats to be eliminated. Others, like the scholarly ethereals, recognized the gift being offered and began the difficult process of questioning their most basic assumptions about reality. But everywhere the message spread that the only real limitation was the willingness to imagine something greater. Humanity became the bridge between what was and what could be. They taught other species that consciousness could transcend any boundary if it refused to accept that the boundary was permanent. The edge of the galaxy was no longer a wall that marked the end of everything known. It had become a doorway to infinite possibilities, and humanity held the key that could open it for everyone.